For art and culture, we've got Charity Aaron, Mary Mallory, Celia Ledbetter, Jennifer Delinsky, and I'm Jennifer. I probably just murdered your name, and I apologize for that. How do you, Jennifer, unmute yourself right quick and tell me how you pronounce your name?
Hey, it's Donalski.
Donalski. Okay, sorry about that. I really got that one messed up. Donal, long A. Jennifer Donalski and Becca Moody is on art and culture. Economic development is Dr. Hazel Cole, Kim Holder, Will Rodriguez, Kurt Henley, and Richard Dobbs. Education is Jane McCandless, Sal Peralta, Stephanie Tullis, John Hinman, Terry Phillips, Walter Hatchett, and Dave Smith. Environmental is Nola Howard, Johnny Waters, Carolyn Carey, Mitch Springer, John Bass, and Angela Awalt. Human Services is Becky Sailors, Emily Cole, Greg Shadricks, Jennifer Genrich, Reverend Hanson, Ruth Kennedy, and Jim Rafferty. Medical and Hospice is Jennifer Daniel, Mary Beth Maxwell, Catherine Bauman, Catherine Grahams, Ingrid Williamson, and Sam Ogden. So that's, and I'll be sending a list when I send the packets out. So if you didn't have a chance to jot all those down, we actually have 36 total panel members. So Jill, if you don't mind, go ahead and bring it up to PowerPoint. We'll go ahead and get started. While we're doing the presentation, there is a chat box. So if you want to put a question in there, I'll try to grab those as we go. And then if not, we'll certainly have some time at the end. So just jot your questions down as we go. But first of all, thank you all so much for agreeing to serve on a panel. I think you'll find it fun and enlightening. I think some of you may call it a little bit frustrating because as you'll see in a few minutes, we have far more in request than we have funds available. And so for some of you, particularly education and human services, it's going to be some tough decisions because there's always some grants out there that you would like to fund, but we just don't have enough money. I will tell you, we actually were able to take a small one off the list because it was a specific COVID request and we still have COVID funds available. So we were able to shift that small one also. That's one small little one that you guys don't have to worry about. But thank you so much on behalf of the board for serving on the grant panels. This is probably one of the main core functions of the foundation, is to see the needs in the community and try to appropriate some grant funds to address those needs. Some of you know a lot about the Community Foundation. Some of you may not know very much about it at all. So those of you who are well versed in Community Foundation, if you'll indulge me for just a minute or two, I'm going to give just kind of a brief background about the foundation. The Community Foundation is kind of a hybrid. Unlike the United Way that raises money and gives it away, we actually take the funds that donors entrust to us and then we invest them in a fairly conservative investment portfolio. And then those earnings go back pro rata share to those funds. So if a donor has a fund with us, then those earnings go back and it's basically tax-free money that they have. The tax implications, the tax break comes when the money comes to the foundation. It goes onto our books. That donor no longer reports that as income. And then any money that it earns or unfortunately loses, as we learned in March with the market, that's on a pro rata share. We're currently cash managing around 23 million, but we have assets of close to in the 90 and 92 million. And what that difference in that is that we have some limited liability partnerships that we hold for several donors. And about 85% of that money will actually come to the foundation at some point in time. I tell people I probably won't be sitting in this chair when all that happens, but somebody's going to have a lot of money to do a lot of good work with in the future. Julie, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The four roles of the foundation is we are seen in the community as a builder and a caretaker, building of assets, and then also being a careful caretaker of those funds. We're also a service provider. We help facilitate discussions with donors to help them learn what's going on in the community. Some donors come to us and know exactly who they're going to give their money to. Others don't know. They don't know. And so they come to us and say, I have a passion for the environment. I have a passion for children. I have a passion for, whatever. And we try to match them up with those charities in the community that we feel like are doing really good work. Grant Maker, that's what you guys are learning about today, is that the donors actually make grants to the community. They can direct their funds to certain charities or faith-based groups. And then the foundation also runs multiple grant programs. The Community Impact Program is by far our largest grant program. But we run grant programs for the Richards family. We run grant programs for art enrichment, for veterans groups, Power the Purse, and we actually operate 5. There's actually one that provides funds for predominantly African American churches in Carroll County only. So sometimes we run a grant program. Julie, I'm getting some feedback. Is that me?
What?
All right. Okay. All right.
I'm meeting some people.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. All right, if you'll just go back to that second slide right quick. Sorry, guys. We'll just mute everybody as they join the call. So like I said, we run 5 different grant programs, some for donors and then some of the foundations. Then also what I think is probably one of my more favorite roles is as a convener, catalyst, and a collaborator. We try to work across, we work in Carroll, Haralson, and Heard counties. And we actually work across those trying to, when needs are brought to our attention or when we see something, we try to bring groups together to have the discussions and possibly come up with solutions. The COVID is probably our latest one. We've been hosting nonprofit calls every week and went to bi-weekly. Now we're going to monthly, trying to brainstorm and address some of the issues that surfaced due to COVID. We've also worked in homelessness space, and we've been called to work on that again right recently. We've worked on backpack programs, worked on a number of things over the years. Next slide, Julie. Just a little history. We actually were organized in 2002. And when I say became a live organization, that's when we kind of got everything up and running. I actually came to work for the foundation April 1st of 2003. And so April Fool's Day, it's not lost on me that was my first day of work someday. So but we granted, the first grants went out probably in 2004. So it's been a very interesting ride since 2003. Our main core vision is to improve the lives of the people who live in Carroll, Haralson, and Heard County. And so how we go about doing that is very different from day to day. The organization, we have a board of directors and staff. The staff is myself, I'm the president, and then Julie Strickland, who you also see on the call. She handles all of our finances. She's our director of operations. Michelle Connerly works part-time for us as director of partnerships. And then we have a part-time admin person as well. Our current, I'm going to grab my list right quick. Because I can't remember everybody. We currently have 15 people on our board. Fred O'Neill's our current board chair. Ann Newman is the vice chair. And then Alan Martinez is our secretary treasurer, as well as the chair of our investment committee. In addition to those folks, also on our board is Cisco Balzon, Andrea Chapman, Lynn Clark, Reverend Steve Davis, Richard Davis, Susan Fleck, Tim Grizzard, Andrew Levern, Linda McWhorter, Jackie Pate, Monica Smith, and Bobby Stewart. So that's all of our current board members. They can serve 3-year terms, and they can repeat those 2 additional times. They can serve a maximum of 9 years, and after the 9th year, there's a 1-year sit-out rule, and then they can come back. We have a lot of different funds at the foundation. We have a donor advised fund, which an individual donor, it could be a family, it could be an individual, a company, an organization has a donor advised fund. And then we have designated funds, and that's where a specific charity is designated by the donor, and that's where the proceeds go to at their direction. And then we also have field of interest funds, where that's usually where some of our grant making comes through. We currently have 146 different funds that we're currently managing, and we have a very sophisticated software system that actually tracks and keeps up with those as an individual fund. Currently, our financial assets are managed by Mason Investments. We actually go out to market every 7 years and see who is best suited to handle our investments. So they are out of Reston, Virginia. And they currently work with about 30 plus other community foundations across the country. And so that was one of the basis of why they were selected, is because they do a lot of work with community foundations, and they understand all of our quirkiness. We provide a lot of assistance to nonprofits, management, due diligence, board work, a lot of those kind of things. And we also started a few years ago an online resource directory called West Georgia Cares, and that allows people to go search and look for resources, whether it's housing, food. There's multiple categories on there. And then the back side of that is actually a case management platform that allows our nonprofits to talk to each other and see who's helping whom and try to reduce duplication or try to expedite the process of providing assistance. And again, I mentioned earlier, we work in Carroll, Haralson, Heard counties for community impact grants. However, our donors are allowed to give money to qualified charities literally anywhere in the country and the world for that matter. And we provide a due diligence process to make sure that those charities are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, community impact program, where you guys come in, there's actually 6 different categories, and these are actually delineated in the IRS regs of what the charitable purposes can be for a 501c3. I will tell you, we do not do any scholarship money with the community impact program. Now, we do have donors who have elected to do that, but for the most part, we stay far, far away from scholarships, and just because they're so time consuming. And we just, as you heard earlier, we have a very lean and mean staff. And so we really just don't have a lot of the staff capacity to do a lot of scholarship work. And we don't want to compete with the university or the technical college because we feel like that need is being addressed in the community. So these are the 6 areas that I mentioned earlier. And we take grant applications in each of those areas. And so you have agreed to serve in one of these six areas. So next slide, Julie. Just for the past, to let you know, we have distributed over $4.4 million to area nonprofits and faith-based groups to date through this program. And then this year we'll have $305,000. So I think for our community and our size, I think that's pretty darn incredible that we've been able to give away that much money and have that kind of economic impact. I'm going to run through the guidelines here in just a minute. I will also be sending these to you in print, and they're also on our website, which is www.cfwg.net. And so you can also look at this as well. Julie, will you back up one slide, please? Thank you. Who can apply? They have to be a qualified 501c3 charity. They have to be in existence for at least 2 years in order to apply to us. We have already gone through all of the grants that you'll receive and verified that they do have their 501c3 and they've been in existence for at least 2 years. And we actually, I think, disqualified 2 or 3 because they did not meet that basic criteria. But faith-based groups can apply, governmental entities can apply. So you'll see a pretty good mixture across the board in some of the categories that we get a lot of applications for. What does the foundation generally fund? That's actually a lot of different things, and you'll see the variation. I mean, sometimes there's trends. I think one year we bought a lot of walk-in refrigerators, it seemed like. And then I know one year in our art grants, I think we bought a lot of clay. I think we probably bought about 6 tons of clay is what it seemed like. But we really are looking for, looking at the needs in the community and who best is positioned to address those, who can, is really making a difference in that space, or who's got some creative ideas. There is a host of things that are not eligible. Oh, and also one thing too, if you see sometimes, we did pull one of them out, but if you see an application, you think, well, gosh, this is really not a good fit for this category. The grantees self-select themselves, so we don't put them in categories. I learned, that was one of my hard lessons I learned really early with this work, is that and in fact, some of them could actually very easily fit in more than one category, but they only are eligible to apply in one because of the panel structure. You guys are kind of siloed. You're just going to get just the art and culture grants or just the human service. You will just get your applications. Let's see. We are looking at their capacity. Do they have evidence? Have they done this kind of work? Is it kind of, in their lane, or is it something completely out of what they're able to do? some of the things, and there's a pretty good list, but some of the things that aren't eligible, we don't want to use our money to build someone's endowment. We want the money to go immediately into the community. We don't fund operating deficits. If somebody's in a hole, we don't want to help dig that hole deeper. We want them to be able to kind of show us how they're going to deal with certain things. We can't do memorials, grants to individuals, lobbying activities. Some of this is kind of cut and dried, but those are kind of some of the basic things. The other one that we actually added a few years ago is that we cannot fund a facility or structure that the nonprofit entity does not own. We can't improve private property. They have to be owning it or in the process of buying it. So that goes into that particular area. Also, participating in religious service cannot be a condition of the goods and services. So, for instance, we had one a few years ago that they were going to do like a breakfast program, or no, I think it was lunch, and the church was going to pick the kids up, feed them, and then they had to sit through a church service before they went home. That's a no-no. You can't do that. So if it's a food pantry or any of those kind of things, they have to be able just to hand the food over without there being any expectation that they have to attend any type of religious service. Are new organizations eligible to apply? No. If they're startups, my running joke is that the gray hair that I have spent a lot of money covering up is due to those little startups. And so they have to be in existence for at least 2 years before they can apply to us. And like I said, we've gone through and made sure they've had their 501c3 for at least 2 years. So we have hopefully taken those out, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Operating support, we get this question a good bit, and particularly in times like we're currently in. We also dealt with this back in the 2008, 2009 era. The foundation does do operating. Carroll EMC, our sister organization who does very similar work, they do not do operating. And so that causes a lot of times for us to get more of those operating grants. I tell the nonprofits a lot of times that while yes, we do operating, it's harder money to get because typically the panels want to look at that very closely and they say, okay, is this a temporary situation? What are their plans to not be in the situation this time next year? And so, and then they also look at board support. What is their capacity to raise funds? And so I will tell you, just by breezing through the applications, you're going to see some operating assistance requests just because most of them have had to cancel their spring fundraisers, and now they're looking at having to cancel their fall one. Now, we've also done some calls and talking about virtual fundraisers, and some of those are attempting to do that, but some of them are really kind of having to seriously look at getting some operating money. Some of them were eligible and did get the PPP money, and then some of them did not. So you'll see some of that coming up. Can organizations apply for continued funding? Yes. And you will see one thing we'll be sending you, and it's a pretty hefty document, and we'll sort it by organization and not by year. You will be able to see, for instance, the Carroll County Soup Kitchen and how many times they've received funding from us. And you'll see that some of them have gotten funding over multiple years. I will tell you that that's not necessarily an automatic yes or an automatic no. That is a year-by-year basis. We tell the nonprofits that we should not be an automatic entry on their revenue line item, that every year we never know what the competition, so to speak, is going to look like. I will tell you there are a few things in the stack that the foundation is probably going to fund almost every year just because of the results they're getting. And it is an unmet need in our community that nobody's really addressing. So we can talk about that specifically about those particular grantees as you have them on your list. The range of funding, this is probably a question I get a good bit from the nonprofits, is, how much should I apply for? There's two schools of thought about that. And I used to write grants for a living. And so I think I try to be sensitive to some of their questions in the applications because I know kind of what a pain in the neck these grant applications can be. I tell them the larger the number, the greater expectation. If you're asking for $50,000, then you better be working in all three counties, and it better be a significant marker that you're trying to move. The smaller grants, the 3,000 ones, or somewhere in that range, those are the expectations there of having a huge impact. is not as great. The one example I use a good bit is that one year we got grant applications, 2 grant applications, one from a food pantry and one from a special population camp for children. Both of them asked for $1,500. The camp was going to basically fund 3 children to go to camp, and then the other one was going to buy 3 tractor trailer loads of food. Well, common sense will tell you which is going to have the larger impact. It's going to be the 3 tractor loads of food. And so it's not saying that camp's not important, but for us to be able to stretch our money as far as we possibly can and to have the largest impact, that's one of the things that we're looking for. So you're going to see requests in here, and to be honest with you, I can't remember off the top of my head. There's requests, unfortunately, in here for like $500 or $600, and I wish I'd gotten to those folks early because this is a whole lot of work to do for $500. And then you'll see some, greater than 20,000. I think that's probably the largest ones that we've gotten this year. All righty. But I'll be sending you, like I said, the list of those applications. You'll get those as just as a group. So just art and culture or just human services or whatever. All right. The other thing is what are the elements of a good grant application? What would you or what would I consider to be a good grant application? First of all, as I mentioned earlier, we have reviewed these to make sure that the required elements are included. If they're not, we've touched base with them to find out what's going on. But all the ones that you're seeing are good to go. Some of it we look at is kind of the program details, and there's also going to be an evaluation sheet. This is not anything you're going to turn back to me, but it is kind of like 4 or 5 categories where you can rank 0 to 5, with 5 being excellent or very good. And then, of course, 0 and 1 means didn't meet that criteria, didn't meet the qualifications or whatever. So that's just a good little piece that you can kind of, as you're going through the applications, and the applicant is listed at the top, and then you have each of the categories. So it's just like a little 1-page thing that we have found for most groups to be helpful. Those of you that don't have very many applications, it's usually not that big of a deal. But for some of you that have a number of applications, I will tell you they all start running together at some point. Sometimes you have to go back and reread them. I hope I don't cause anybody to drop off the call or to send me a text and say, Kim, I have changed my mind, because now you're all set in stone. You can't change your mind. But just to let you know, art and culture got 3 applications to consider. Economic development got 2. Education, do not hang up with me right now, but you got 17. The environmental panel got 2. Human services got 18, and medical and hospice got 6. So this is actually not this is typical for kind of how this works. Education and human services typically get the largest stack because those are where our food pantries and then some educational issues kind of pop up. So you'll see those a good bit. Julie, if you'll go back a little bit. So the organizational structure, you want to look at the diversity of the board members. Are they from one group? Are they, it never ceases to amaze me sometimes folks who want to do a lot of work in our community but have no connection to our community. That's not 100% of a deal killer, but it's also, you wonder, how do they know about the needs of our community if there's really no strong connection to their board? Do the board members have any type of demonstrated expertise that would be appropriate? Is the board size, is it appropriate? I mean, is it, 2 people for a fairly large budget, or is it, 15 people, or, but that's kind of a judgment call, what you think might be appropriate. And if they're talking about volunteers carrying out the work, is there a sufficient volunteer base to make that happen? You'll also be looking at some financial information. Is their operating budget? There's actually two sections of this. There's actually the program budget for the thing they're specifically asking money for, and then there's also their organizational budget. Is their organizational budget, is it reasonable? Is their budget for the program or project, is that reasonable? We used to ask them to show a couple of cost estimates of things, but we've said, what, these are big boys and girls, then they should be able to figure this out. But sometimes things happen. We've had situations where someone, for instance, asked for technology for their nonprofit. Well, then all of a sudden Staples or somebody had a sale, and then it's, they have $2,000. Then what happens to that money? They come back to us. Hey, I didn't need quite the full amount, and then we try to find something in that same space. So maybe they need chargers, or they need supplies for the printer or something like that. So, but we just want to make sure that their costs are reasonable. And also from their funding, does it look like it's stable? Does it look like that they may not be around next year? If they're in an operating deficit, what does that look like? Is their personnel reasonable? Do they have, and I'll use an example. A lot of times, like mentoring type programs tend to be a little more cost heavy and personnel heavy, just for the simple fact is you want lower numbers for those mentoring or those type of relationships. But for instance, for a food pantry, obviously they don't need, sometimes those groups don't need quite as the number of people to carry things out, just because it's not as human intense to do that. The other kind of considerations that you might think about is this a duplication of services? And this question gets a good bit of discussion. How many do we need? And I will tell you right now, in the food space, there are some duplications. And right now, I'm thankful we have duplication. With just for Carroll County alone, we have upwards of well over 100,000 people. One food pantry is not going to work for all of Carroll County. And so we have to kind of look at who's currently working in that space, and then who's also asking for money. So I will tell you, in the food space right now, like Open Hands is probably a huge player in that space, but they didn't apply for money this year. So just because, they didn't apply doesn't mean we don't already have space. So we'll actually talk about, as we go through the applications, who else is kind of working. Some of you may be very familiar with other people working in those spaces, and you may not. So that's kind of why I participate in all the discussions, because we work across the board with so many different organizations. I can help fill in some of those blanks for you. But we do not, I tell people all the time, we don't need another closed pantry. I mean, we have, that need is, I think, being sufficiently met. And quite honestly, with some of our current partners, I think the food is being addressed across the board. So we may or may not need to be funding any additional ones in that area. And also, is their timeline reasonable? I will tell you, COVID really threw a lot of our grantees for a loop. They had a lot of things planned for the spring. And so we try to be flexible on their funding and give them opportunities to carry that stuff out. Technically, the rule is they have to spend the money within a year of when it's awarded. This year, we had to extend those deadlines because this was obviously no fault of their own. All right, we'll go ahead and go to kind of the nuts and bolts. Julie, I'll stop for just a second here and see if anybody has any questions. I can't get to my chat box right now, but can you tell me if there's any questions in the chat box?
There aren't any in the chat.
Okay. All right, good. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can throw them in the chat box, or we'll unmute everybody at the end and take questions there too. Okay, now to the hard part. The application criteria, which we kind of talked about. You'll be getting the sheet of all the grantees listed on it, as well as kind of the criteria to be evaluating them on. You can recommend up to 5 applications in each of these spaces. Now, for some of you, in fact, most of you, you don't even have 5 applications. So you think, oh, this is easy. We'll just fund all 3 of them. We'll fund both of them. Not a good idea. They are evaluated on their own merits. If it's not a good application, we don't want to be spending our donors' money to fund that. And so we've actually had in years past where the grant panel looked at those applications and said, you know what, we really want to fund either one of them, and that's perfectly fine, or we just want to fund one of them. So we'll be looking at each individual application on its own merits. How this basically works is that each panel works independently. I'm the only common denominator across the board for all of them. And no matter how much you try to bribe me or torture me, I cannot tell you what work the other groups have done, how much money they've allocated, because we want your decision to be independent of any outside factors. So you will make your selections, your recommendations. You will select the grantees. You will also make a recommendation for the amount of funding. Just because they ask for it does not mean you have to give them 100% of what they ask for. There may be they may ask for 4 or 5 different things, and you say, well, we'll fund this, but we don't want to fund that, and that's okay. There is one question in the application, and I have not gone back and looked at it specifically for each one, but the question does ask, if this is not 100% funded, is the project still viable? And we ask them to answer that question very honestly. And for the most part, I think they do. Because we've had situations before where we gave partial funding, went back and told the grantee, hey, we were only able to fund X amount, and they were not able to make up the difference. A lot of times this comes into play if they're trying to leverage our money with maybe a national or a federal grant or a state grant. They're trying to use our money for leverage, which we absolutely love. We love to see our money, be multiplied in a match situation. But if we short them sometimes, then there's not that capacity to come up with that difference. But I will tell you, and 2 years ago, someone asked for a vehicle of some sort. I think it might have been a van. And it got down to between them and another one, and we didn't really have a lot of money left, or so the group thought. They didn't want to do that dollar amount. And so I excused myself, went to the phone and called them and said, hey, look, this is not a done deal, but the panel is considering funding X amount. Is there a possibility, because they had checked the box no, they couldn't do it without the full amount. I said, could you make this work? And they said yes. But in their conversation, out of the 15,000, if they had just gotten funded 5, they couldn't have made up the 10, but they very easily could have made up the 3. And so even when they say yes and no, sometimes there's some play in that as well. So everybody meets, they make their recommendations. I add all of those up and hope and pray that it comes really close to the amount of money that we have available, which this year is $302,000. If it goes over, which I fully expect it to, and typically it does, then it goes to our grants committee, which is a subset of our board, and then they go in and make the cuts to back into that dollar amount. We try really hard, particularly for the top and maybe even the second application selected. We try not to mess with that one, but we always try to give them at least something. I don't know that the board has ever come in and taken out, because you guys are doing such amazing hard work. They don't want to have to go and redo this stuff. It's just too much work. And so most of the time, whatever you guys recommend, it may be a little bit less money wise, but it goes on to the full board for their consideration. All of the recommendations are due to our office by September 22nd. So we do have a fairly quick turnaround. That's one of the things a lot of people like about this process, is that it's a very short time commitment. Once we make the recommendations, then it immediately then you're done. You're free to go. All the discussions are confidential. We don't discuss kind of what stays in there does not get discussed. The panel, there may be some slight chance, although we don't release y'all's names to anybody other than the board members, that if someone were to accidentally find out that you're on a panel, they cannot discuss with you their grant application. They can't talk to our board members about the grant application. That is an automatic exit out to the right. They get disqualified immediately if they try to discuss that. If you serve on a board of a nonprofit that's being considered, or your immediate family member is, I need you to, I'm sorry, I was looking at the chat question. Emily, I'll get your question in just a second. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. If you are currently serving on a board, or have a spouse that's served on a board, I need you to notify that me ahead of time and let me know that, because you will have to recuse yourself from the discussion about that particular application. Emily, to your question, yes, the 17 and 18 ones, sometimes we can get up to 7, But yes, that's why you guys have a lot of hard work, is because you've got to reduce those down to that number. Let's see, the board will actually vote on October the 20th. And so the selected nonprofits will know after 10/20 if they have received money or if they have not received money. I'm trying to think. Also, too, please, please, please do not contact any of the nonprofits. If you have questions about a grant or something's not clear, reach out to me by phone or email me, because that creates confusion. It also creates a false sense of the nonprofits thinking that they may get money, and then you come to the panel meeting and everybody hates it. And so we don't want to create any confusion. So if you've got a question, if something's not clear, a lot of times I can answer that, but if not, I will reach out to them and let them know. They're a very tight-knit, close-knit group. They talk among themselves. And so if one of them got a phone call, they immediately, the other ones start calling me, going, so-and-so got a phone call, or so-and-so got a site visit and I didn't, does that mean I don't get any money? And so it helps if we can kind of, calm their feathers a little bit if we don't reach out to them ahead of time. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that some of you may have a question about the process. Like I said, I will be in all the meetings from this point forward. I will be reaching out to you and setting up a convenient day and time for us to meet. We'll be doing them all by Zoom calls. I think that'll be the best way, but I'll send like a little calendar invite and do my very, very best to get the most convenient time for everybody to meet. Typically the meetings last about an hour. Sometimes it depends on just how quick. I will tell you, it will, it's always very interesting to me, even with those that have 17 and 18, the panels typically get together and they will have one or two that's their absolute favorite. Everybody just loves them. And then there's some on the bottom that everybody absolutely hates. And so that's easy. You kind of put these here and put the bad ones over here. And then the hard part is the ones in the middle, where everybody kind of likes these for that reason, one or the other. To answer Dr. McCown's question, you will get everything no later than Monday. My goal is hopefully tomorrow, but no later than Monday. You'll receive all the grant applications and all the extra quote materials that kind of come with that. So double check. If you don't get it by, let's say, Monday lunch or shortly after lunch, shoot me an email or call me and say, hey, I didn't get it. Because every now and then I end up in your spam folder, or because I'm sending in a group and it's a larger, document. Sometimes it gets kicked out, but just let me know, because email is fairly reliable, but then sometimes, things happen. So that's what I have got so far. Does anybody else have any questions? Julie, if you want to unmute everybody for just a second, and then we'll see if anybody else got any questions that we've not got in the chat box. But again, thank you all so much for agreeing to doing this. This is back in the old days, the foundation, we used to do this twice a year. Thank goodness we only do it once. I'm not really sure how we kept our sanity when we did it twice a year. And then we actually only had a grant group of about 3 or 4 board members, and it would take days and days. So I much love this whole panel process. And we've been doing the panel process probably about 7 years at this point. So it works out really well, and people really enjoy it, and they want to come back another year. So that's always a good thing for us to get folks to come back and do it again.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh yeah, Mary.
Did if an entity has a director that's being paid to run the nonprofit, is that shown in some financials? That is that something that needs to be put out there as well?
Well, usually on their program budget, they'll have personnel. It may not necessarily say, Kim Jones and X amount of dollars or whatever, but it typically just says personnel. But I will tell you, I would say 99% of the folks that apply to us, I know who have volunteer EDs and who don't. We've pulled their 990s at this point. If any of them make over 50,000, that has to be disclosed, and for that, I pretty well know that too. So, we've their 990s, we've already gone through that, so y'all don't have to go digging through all the IRS stuff. We take
good. Great.
We try to make
You've done a fantastic job over these years.
Oh, you're too kind. This is a huge effort, and y'all are part of the team now. So we hope after this process that you can go out into the community and talk about community grants and hopefully educate a few more folks. Like I said, we've been here, since 2002 and 3. And I always say, if I go down to Target right now and stop 5 people coming out of the store and say, "What do you know about the Community Foundation?" If one person knows anything, I'm just thrilled out of my mind. Even though we're here across the street from Wendy's, have a gazillion cars going by our huge, 6x4 foot sign every day, there's still people who don't know anything about us. And so we work really hard to let people know what we do and the good work that our donors enable us to do, because they've entrusted us with their funds, and that's a huge responsibility to make sure these funds are spent to the very best of our abilities to make a difference in so many folks' lives out in our community. But one last
here.
Yeah, Hazel.
Hey, hello everybody. First of all, I popped in late because class stuff, but I'm here and I'm excited. I do serve on executive board for a local nonprofit that may be seeking funding, and I just want to make sure I'm not assigned to that. So
I don't. In fact, I can assure you, you're not. That panel that is not. But once you get your packet just for your individual panel, you will see, all the grant applications and who they are. And so if you see that you're on one of those boards.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you served on that board in times past,
No, I'm new.
I don't care.
Yeah.
If you're a current active board member. But I will tell you this, even though you have to recuse yourself from, that final discussion, I will tell you in one year, this is probably, 5 years ago at this point, we had a board member who sat very quietly. She didn't say a word. And so it was between this organization that she was on the board and another organization. And so she raised her hand. She goes, "I'm sorry." She said, "But can I just say one thing?" And I was like, "Okay, sure. Knock it out." She said, "Y'all don't need to fund our organization." And I was just kind of taken aback. And she said, "Number one, the board was not informed of this request at all. We had no idea it was out there." And she said, "In the big scheme of things," she goes, "this is not a big need for us." And she said, "We have other ways of funding this." So she said, "If you're trying to decide between us and somebody else," she goes, "take us off the table." And you could hear a collective sigh in the room. Everyone went, "Oh," so, if you have a vital piece of information like that, please do not withhold it from us. But it was very helpful because it was a very hard discussion. It was 2 very worthy organizations, and they were doing really good work. It was just, they just had that one little slot left. And so by her taking that one off the table, it was very helpful for the rest of everybody.
Okay.
That. So, but you'll get those lists hopefully no later than Monday. I'm shooting for tomorrow. We had our intern start yesterday. Yay. And so put those things together. So it may happen tomorrow. It may happen tomorrow. But thanks again to all of you. I would give you a big collective hug if I could. But thank you all so much for doing this. And I'll be seeing you in the coming weeks, and we'll get back together as panelists, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.